Mark Watson, thanks for your time. Where do you see the campaigns at the moment? Donald Trump back in front of a big rally in Nevada. That's where he likes to be, in person campaigning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both campaigns have now settled into a bit of a groove. Donald Trump, as you say, really draws a lot of energy from those crowds, from the chanting, from the heightened rhetoric. And I think he will just persist with that, trying to invigorate his base and also to energise his own personal campaign. The Democrats, on the other hand, I think have adopted what is largely a small target strategy for Joe Biden. I think they'll carefully manage what appearances he makes to avoid any possible stumbles or gaffes that could derail the campaign. And I think the reason for that is that their internal polling probably reflects the public polling, which says that while we're all a bit gun-shy following the last election, the polls nonetheless suggest that Joe Biden's leads are cementing in key states. Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin are going to be critical because they were the states, the wins in those states paved the way to the White House for Donald Trump.
And what are those numbers saying for Biden at the moment?
Florida is still a knife-edge state. There's a small lead for Joe Biden, but I think it's well within the margin of error, so you'd have to say that remains a knife-edge state, could go either way. Pennsylvania and Michigan, the lead for Joe Biden is solidified around the 4.5% to 5% mark. That's again at the margins of the error in the polls, but they are staying steady there, and I think they therefore carry some value as a predictor of where that's headed. Wisconsin will be very disappointing for the president. The lead there for Joe Biden, 6 to 7%. It's broken through that margin of error barrier and I think has a lot of predictive validity for the forthcoming election. So I think, as I say, that the Democrats will see this at this stage of the campaign as Joe Biden's to lose and therefore will want to limit the possibilities that something in their campaign could knock it off course.
What's the significance of the fact that the congressional elections are being held at the same time as the presidential? What are the implications of that?
Yes, it's really easy with all the light and colour and movement of a presidential election campaign to lose sight of the fact that on the same day as the American electorate goes to the polls to elect their next president, they will also be electing 435 members of the House of Representatives. The whole of the House will be up for grabs, and 1/3 of the Senate. At the moment, the Democrats have control of the House. They took control in the 2018 midterm elections, and I don't think anyone's predicting that that will change in November. The Senate, however, is much more interesting. At the moment, it splits 53-47 in favour of the Republicans. It's hard to see the Democrats flipping that into a majority for the Democrats in the Senate, but there are a number of ways they could wind up with a 50-50 split in the Senate, which would be very interesting, because that means that whoever controls the White House effectively controls the Senate, because the Vice President of the United States also holds the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. And the Senate is very valuable to the White House because, of course, they're part of the confirmation process for appointments made by the White House, including judges of the US Supreme Court.
Are there any other surprises that we might see in terms of the presidential election? I've been discussing with various people in recent days about states that might flip. For example, the red state has been forever and a day, Texas.
Yeah, Texas is a very interesting one. I know Democrats hold out some hope for that. That really would be an earth-shaking event for Texas to turn blue. I don't see it at this stage. I don't see the numbers as being sufficiently strong for the Democrats to flip that state, but it's certainly one that they believe is still in play.
And what about for Donald Trump? Any that he's eyeing in terms of trying to flip the other way?
I think Donald Trump would really be trying to work hard to hold on to the gains he made in the last election and see that as his way back to the White House.
OK, let's look at some other news internationally. Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, has now got a successor. It's got to be formalised through the Japanese Parliament, but he's now the head of the LDP, as it's known, the ruling party, and he has been the Cabinet Secretary for about 8 years, so a lot of experience.
That's correct. Yoshihide Suga is destined to take over from Prime Minister Abe following the LDP elections, but Shinzo Abe will be very difficult to replace. He's been a source of stability and continuity in our region for a long time now. He was elected in 2012, Prior to that, he'd had a term in 2006-07 as Prime Minister. So we have to remember that during that period, he actually dealt with 3 US presidents and 6 Australian Prime Ministers. So as I say, very difficult for his successor to step into those shoes. Prime Minister Abe introduced a range of economic reforms known as Abenomics in Japan, met with mixed results in trying to kickstart the Japanese economy. But in the realm of international relations and strategic affairs, I think he was far more successful. He was a very outward-looking Prime Minister for Japan. He signed Japan up to a number of very significant international agreements, including, in Australia's case, the quadrilateral agreement between Australia, the US, Japan and India. He also signed up to the trilateral security dialogue between Australia, the US and Japan. In terms of Australia-Japan relations, he elevated that bilateral relationship to a special strategic partnership, and with then Prime Minister Tony Abbott, he signed a new and even more liberal trade agreement to enhance trade between the two countries. He'll be very difficult to replace. He was, as Prime Minister Morrison called him, a true friend of Australia.
And finally, we've seen this data leak from a big Chinese company, Shenzhen Shenhua. Is this a concern, or would you expect Chinese entities to be involved in this space?
Both. I think it's very concerning. The story here that's broken over the last 24, 48 hours is that this Chinese company has accumulated millions of records on individuals around the world, collecting their personal data through a combination of what's known as web scraping, going out and looking for all those bits of digital information that we all leave behind when we go on Facebook or Twitter. But in addition to that, it looks as if they've also acquired data from the dark web. And that really is the seedy underbelly of the internet, where individuals, criminals, terrorists and others can trade in information, buy and sell information, invisible to the mainstream web. Why a company like this would want to acquire literally millions of records on individuals, we don't know. Even more concerning, however, is that they've then categorised some individuals as being, quote, of special interest or, quote, politically exposed. Now, in Australia, that's about 635 individuals, politicians, military people, business people. We don't know why they're categorised as special interest, and we don't even know what politically exposed means, but it's hard to construct a valid commercial reason why a company like this would accumulate that data and then store it and then categorise it the way it is. I've got no doubt that police and security agencies around the world will be looking at this data very closely to understand who this company is, what data they've collected,
and where they fit into the Chinese system.
And where they fit into the Chinese system, because we do know that the Chinese intelligence services over the years have adopted an attitude of vacuuming up as much data as they can get wherever they can get it, often with a view to not understanding exactly what they might be doing with it right now, but storing it, warehousing it, available for later use. We also know that the Chinese security apparatus does outsource some of its cyber activities to private entities, either legitimate companies who will do work on behalf of the Chinese government and party, or sometimes establishing front companies for that purpose. Is that the case here? Well, I think we'll find out more about this story in weeks and months ahead.
It's Mark Watson there from Bondi Partners, the National Security Advisor with Bondi Partners.